Welcome back to the Policy Viz podcast. I'm your host, John Schwabish. We are back. I've been a little bit sporadic with episodes after a big launch in September and October, but the federal government shutdown here in the US made things a little bit wild for me, so I'm back. I've got a whole bunch of episodes to fill out the rest of this calendar year, and we're going to start this last sprint with my interview with Chris Parmer, CEO of Plotly. You may know Plotly is one of the data visualization tools, sits on top of a bunch of other sorts of tools, including Python and R, and what Chris and I focus on in our interview and our discussion, which I should say, I did interview Chris several years ago on the show, so it's interesting to see the evolution of the tool. But what we focus on a lot in our conversation is the addition of AI, or the inclusion, the implementation of AI into Plotly's new product, Plotly Studio. And what's really interesting about it, and this is where I think AI is going to embed itself in data visualization tools, is you load your tool into Plotly Studio, you query the AI, the large language model, and then it generates the graph for you. Well, it writes the code and then generates the graph for you. And so I think you probably have a little bit of that hallucination problem that we all are familiar with, because seemingly it's embedded within a box. It gives you the code so that you can go in and change it and learn from it. And so it's all sort of right there in the package. And so we spent a lot of time talking about that. We talked about the evolution of Plotly as a company and the staff over the last several years, and just generally talk about what Chris sees in the field of data visualization tools going forward. So I'm back. The show's back after a couple weeks off. Don't forget, there's lots of episodes to go back to over the last few months. The last two episodes really focusing on mapping, tactile physical maps, and a great new book, both out of Esri Press. I've spoken to BLS commissioners. I've spoken to other economists to talk about threats to the federal data system. Lots of stuff for you to listen to and take a look at when it comes to communicating your data as best and effectively as possible. All right, that's enough for me. Let's get over to the interview. Here's my talk with Chris Parmer, CEO of Plotly. Hey, Chris. Wow. Good to see you. It's been several years, I think, since we last talked. How are you?
Great. Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. It's always good to have folks back on the show. Means either they're bored or I'm still around, or a little bit of both. So good to see you. So, let's get right into it. Like, where do things stand at Plotly? Like, where are you guys? How many people are working there? Like, give us the lowdown on where things stand.
Yeah, totally. So we are over 100 people now. We're distributed a little bit around the world. We've got some folks in Europe now, but mostly US and Canada. We still have a huge open source community behind our visualization technologies and our data application technologies. But most recently, we've gone full in on AI, and we just released a new product called Plotly Studio, which is our AI native product for creating data visualization, doing data analytics, creating dashboards and data applications, and it builds on a lot of the technology that we've developed over the last 12 years of the company.
Okay, so I want to spend most of our time talking about the new tools, the new capabilities, the AI stuff, but for folks, let's just start at the beginning, though. For folks who are not familiar with Plotly, can you give them just the quick little what it is and what they can do with it?
Totally. Yeah. So we are a data visualization, data analytics company. Our roots are in code-based data analytics and data visualization. So primarily, most of our customers use programming languages like Python to do their data analytics. They primarily work in more technical industries like finance, policy, bioinformatics, energy, and data science. And primarily, they use our technologies when traditional BI tools like Tableau or Power BI don't cut it, because they need to do more advanced analytics or more custom data visualization, or they're primarily just doing their data analytics in code for a variety of other reasons. And now, as the company evolves, we're kind of taking that same code-based foundation and architecture, but bringing it into the AI era where now the interface isn't necessarily just code, but natural language, which means that all of these powerful and sophisticated capabilities that have been available for over a decade that we've developed are now available to a much wider audience, which is exciting.
Okay, so AI, obviously, that's all anyone's talking about these days. I am intrigued about how you all are thinking about and incorporating AI into the tool set. So is Plotly Studio right now, is that the kind of only place where AI is integrated, or is that like the place where it's most being used?
That's the main place, and it's totally built sort of from this AI first viewpoint. So we're not bolting it on. We really kind of went back to the foundations and thought, okay, if we were to build an AI first data visualization dashboard product, what would that look like? And our approach is really about, architecturally, the AI is generating the code to do data analytics, to do data visualization, and then our product runs that code and then displays the results to the user. And that's an important distinction to know about, because we aren't asking the AI to do data analytics directly. We're asking the AI to generate code, and then that code will do the data analytics, and we will run it, and then we'll display the results. So it's important because a lot of the issues that you might see or think about with doing something very precise like data analytics with something very imprecise and prone to hallucinations with like AI don't really happen as much in this architecture, because the AI is generating the code, and that code is precise.
Right. So I can ask, I can go into Plotly Studio and say, hey, I want to make a bar chart of the, I've loaded in the data. I want to make this bar chart, click return, or, even more detailed, I assume, than that, have a conversation with it, build this bar chart for me. It generates a bar chart, and then it gives me the snippet of the code so that I can go in as the user, sort of still control it.
That's right. Yeah. So you have the full, verifiability, auditability, your ability to edit the code as well. It's not necessarily like sort of a black box that you might have if you are using an AI for doing like image generation or something like that. There's a lot that happens in the model that you might not have control over. It's a different approach.
So if I bring, say, a big data set, and obviously I'm asking because I haven't tried it yet, so this is perfect. I get like the tutorial right here. So if I bring in my big data set, can I use Plotly Studio to essentially query or interrogate the data to determine what I eventually want to plot?
Yeah. We're primarily focused on the output. So it works best if you kind of have an idea in your mind's eye of the visualization that you want to create. You can ask very open-ended questions like, show me the top products over time, by revenue. And, in that statement, I'm not saying create a bar chart where the x-axis is this and the y-axis is this and aggregate it by that. I'm just giving an open-ended statement or open-ended question. And we'll make several attempts at generating code to hopefully answer that question. But there could still be a gap between the type of question that you can ask and the type of answer that's even possible in the data. But we try, and I think that it's an important thing in our product philosophy is we're always going to be showing you the answer in a table or in a graph in something that is very rigorous without having the AI sort of hallucinate an answer. Whether it's that answer is in the data or not.
Right. And so if I want to create my bar chart in the style of, I don't know, the Financial Times or the Economist, that have like that sort of branded look.
Yeah.
Is like, I can do that in ChatGPT, but I don't really trust it right now. But like, could I do that in Plotly Studio and say, hey, here's my bar chart, but I want to style it like the Economist?
Totally. Yeah. And it's going to vary on how much of like that brand style is in the model. So very common things like the Economist, or we had a user recently be like, make my app look like the Matrix. It's all like that green monospace fonts. And it does a pretty amazing job at it.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about it too is you can also be as precise as you want. If you are like, use these exact hex codes, it's going to use those those exact hex codes. It's not going to
Right.
hallucinate and come up with a different one. So, and that's kind of actually one of the amazing things about working with AI is that you can be as precise as you want. You can start with something open-ended, see what it shows you, the chart that it creates, look at it, reflect on it, and then become more and more and more precise over time
Mhm.
until at the end, the sort of spec that you write to define your chart might be really, really detailed and control
Yeah.
every single thing that you want. But you don't need to start there. And I think that's a really thing that feels really productive about it. You can start with something very loosely defined and then iterate after.
Yeah, because it is lowering the bar for folks who need to make a chart or a dashboard but don't care necessarily about the branded colors that they have to use or the font that they have to use. They just know they have to use it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
What happens with folks? And this is a question I keep getting asked about lots of different tools that are open source or cloud based. But what happens with folks who have data that are secure, private, administrative?
Mhm.
That that can't sort of go out in the world. Like, how have you tried to solve that challenge?
Yeah. What we see among our customers is that almost all of the large customers now are running their own model within their own cloud infrastructure. So, for us, our product works best with Claude, Anthropic's Claude model, and we run it ourselves in GCP and in AWS. We've got it running multiple places. So we don't even use Anthropic's infrastructure directly. And so, our customers will do the same thing. They'll run the model within their own infrastructure so that it doesn't leave the firewall. And we see customers with different in some cases using different models for different types of analytics and data depending on the privacy of it. Like they'll use one of OpenAI or Anthropic's model for a certain level of data, but then other data that's maybe more sensitive, they'll use Llama or something like that, but they're still all running it within their organization. And there's a lot of kind of interesting geopolitics around it. Some customers that are
Yeah,
only using non-Western ones, other ones that are only using Western ones.
yeah,
If it's running within their own infrastructure, like the data isn't leaking, but there's some
right.
concern maybe about internal bias or something like that. That's definitely way more on the like super high security, high regulated side of the industry. But those are things that some folks are considering. Um,
Yeah,
our approach is just, well, we integrate. We've got an enterprise plan that if that's important to you, then that's configurable at within our enterprise plan.
right.
Yeah.
So far, and I know it's only been out for a few weeks, but clearly you've been testing it for, I'm sure, a while. What are you in early sort of stages now? What are you seeing as the use, like either interesting or just common use cases? Like, are people just kind of querying it to say, build me a bar chart, build me a line chart?
Mhm.
Let's try seven other things. Like, what are you sort of seeing as the use cases these days?
Yeah. The big one is that in so many organizations, there's a pretty technical data scientist or data analyst that is just totally the bottleneck for the team or the organization. And we're seeing this adoption now where that person's stakeholders can work a little bit more on their own,
Mhm.
just by working through natural language. So instead of sending the request by email, the stakeholders are already working in natural language. They have been forever,
Yeah,
right? They send
yeah,
emails asking for the chart that they want. They can just do so directly in the tool.
yeah.
And that's great. And we see a bunch of companies that have client facing or customer facing requirements, and their customers are always wanting the charts or the dashboards to be slightly different. And they're instead asking those customers or clients to use Poly Studio instead and ask their own questions. And
Mm.
instead, now the role of some of our customers and even the data scientists and data analysts is more around the data preparation side of things,
Hmm.
and getting all of that set up so that then everybody else can be self-service in the analytics downstream of that, which is
Mm.
really exciting. I mean, there's
Yeah,
tons of bottlenecks there. It's really great for people to be much more empowered to work on their own.
yeah. But what are you seeing when that person who is not the data person is doing these queries using the AI? But they're probably not then looking at the code that's generated. Is there still, have you seen like they can build now the chart that they want but are they still going back to that data person to say like, hey, I've done this, can you check? Or is it like there's enough faith at this point that they're just like, I just kind of need this bar chart for internal work. It's
Totally. Yeah.
yeah.
There is now a lot of faith in the code itself. And I think what happens more is there's more interrogation around the data in a way that I think there always has been, though I don't think the dynamic is really different. And in a way, it's almost helped because the stakeholders that are looking at these charts often are the domain experts of the data anyway. So it's easy for them to spot check things that might be obviously wrong, or even to create the follow-up visualizations or tables that they can use to spot check their own results. So, you create a bar chart that's an aggregation of a bunch of other data. And the way that you verify that isn't necessarily just by looking at the code to see if the panda's syntax is correct, but really the way you want to do it is to then like drill in and look at each one of those bars and take a sample of the data and kind of do all this manual spot checking work, which is something that often the stakeholders are pretty good at because they're the experts in the data anyway. And so we see a lot more more importance around building tooling around that spot checking, auditing the data kind of thing. And I think the more people that are looking at the data, the better that is.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned the dashboarding world. I'm curious where Plotly sort of sits. I noticed on the main page of the website, there's a big focus on dashboarding. I'm curious where Plotly is with dashboarding and also how it intersects with the new AI tools.
Yeah. So where we look at, if you're just working in a chat-based interface today, like using ChatGPT, and you ask a question, you'll get an answer that's an answer at a point in time, right? So if you upload a data set and you ask, for a chart or something like that, chart's not going to change. That answer isn't going to change over time. And so there's still this importance, in my view, that you are creating these artifacts that can have a long lifespan and that will actually update when the data changes. So if you're working in chat today, you might get an answer, but then you don't want to have that same 50 back and forth chat tomorrow to get that same answer. Do that every single day, right? And so that's our view, is that if as a side product of doing data analysis with AI, you get this long-lived dashboard that updates in real time with your data that you can always go back to without needing to go back to AI and have the same conversation over and over, that's really good. So that's our view. We view kind of AI as more of this tool to be creating these dashboards, and then dashboards have a long life. Consumers of the dashboards often will want to look at the same thing in the same format every day, and the consistency of that is really nice. Of course, a lot of the downsides of dashboards still exist, of like you might want to view it in a slightly different way. And I think now AI enables those end viewers to customize their own view in a much easier way.
So I don't personally. So I'll admit I don't have much experience using Plotly and dashboards, and I'm curious. This is really a two-part question. So the first part of the question is, are people using the dashboarding capabilities in Plotly, sort of, historically, for public facing or internal facing sort of dashboards? And secondly, in your experience, do people actually use the public facing dashboards? I have more and more hesitation that when I, create sort of this like data exploration tool and put it on the web, that nobody really uses it. Like internals, I think, a different world. You and I are working on a project together. We need to explore the data together in real time. That's a different, I think, ask. But public facing, I just feel like we just put a bunch of stuff out there and nobody looks at it. So that's kind of a two-parter there.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree. I think where we've seen the most value, the most uptick, is when people are building these dashboards that are really used in operational settings, right? And we've kind of come up with different terminology, like we call them data apps sometimes instead of dashboards, to signal this more like this is something that's used in your day-to-day operations, right? It's really tweaked for the viewers that are using it that need to reference this data every day, whether they're monitoring like the electric grid and they're out in the field looking at the data. It's these dashboards are used kind of as reference materials, or they're used, to monitor trends over time and things like that. Or they have, input and output, so you can actually upload your own data or update the data behind it because you're an end user within this organization that's modifying
Mm-hmm.
it. So that's definitely what we see. And I totally agree with you on the public side. It's very tempting to put up this sort of generic chart builder and say, oh, yeah, well, anybody can just look at whatever they want.
Yeah.
It's actually often not true. Uh,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
and I think about this a lot now with AI because we've built our fair number of chart editors over time, and they need to become so sophisticated to be able to answer the broad range of analytical questions that you might have. And
Mm-hmm.
so it is now so much easier just to create the bespoke visualization that you want immediately
Mm-hmm.
without going through this, generic chart editing interface. A classic or an example I've been exploring a lot on the public side is I look at San Francisco's 311 data, which is like the complaints line. So if there's
Mm-hmm.
or somebody's blocking your driveway, you call this number, and the data is public, and it's awesome. And we have a new mayor in the city who's been great. And I'm kind of curious, like, okay, can we look at the data to see before and after? Has, response time to city
Mm-hmm.
got better or not? Has it gotten better in certain areas, neighborhoods or not? And there's of course, explore this data interface on the website. It's really tricky to come up with a definitive answer to these types of questions. You're doing complex comparisons. You're doing computations to look at the diffs of different, the time range between open and close date. You're comparing certain things against each other. Like there's a lot of analytics that happens behind the end simple visualization. And I
Yeah.
think that's the piece where, speaking out loud, like that's the piece that we've kind of missed when we create a generic chart editor, is that there's just so much analytics before you get to the chart. And it's not like big data analytics. It's not like
No, right.
data pipeline stuff. It's sort of data prep. Like we haven't, I think as an industry, we haven't had a great terminology around it. It's this lightweight data analytics, data prep stuff. And when we've built just a chart editor in the past, it hasn't always included that. And I think that's what I love about Studio today, is that it's generating the code, and all of that code that you might need to do to prep and shape and analyze the data before you just put it directly into a bar chart is all part of the core experience, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I
So
don't know.
is
I'm curious
the
what you think. You clearly have a.
I mean,
You know,
this has been bouncing around in my head now for the last, I don't know, 10 months basically, that there's a lot of public dashboards out there. A lot of them people make for fun or to show that they have technical chops. All of that's good. There are a lot that you go, in my sector, the nonprofit, social policy, public policy sector, you see a lot of dashboards. Here's the job data, and you can go explore for your state, your county, or whatever. And I feel like if your target audience is the sort of like, I'm going to say like regular person,
yeah.
right? Not another analyst, not another, social scientist, not another data viz enthusiast. If you're trying to reach that, that dad coming home from work, I don't think they want to explore dashboards. I think they just want to know the answer like right away. And so I kind of feel like what often happens is like the dashboard part is at the top, and then maybe there's a description at the bottom, where I'm starting to feel like it should be flipped. You
Mm-hmm.
should tell a story and then say, okay, so here's the bottom line, here's the headline, here's like 3 examples. If you really want to go find your zip code or your area, like,
Mm-hmm.
go in and dive in. And I know that explanation is sort of context. That experience is going to be context dependent, right? If that is important to you to know XYZ, then you're going to spend more time. But I just think we just pour all this stuff out, and this expectation that people are going to dive in and explore the data. I just don't think they're doing it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it comes down to sort of the role of data viz, right?
Yeah.
In some cases, it's a lookup table. As you mentioned, you are very interested in the certain, the average house price in your zip code. And
Yeah.
great, like a data exploration tool will give you that.
Mm-hmm.
Other times you're interested in the broad range of like what's happening to housing prices in the city, but you're not even just interested in that. You're like, why is that happening? Right. And
Yeah.
that's
Right.
included in the data itself.
No. because that's just the data, but I want the understanding. I want the story around it, which is, and this is, I mean, all of this is purely just a feeling and anecdotal, but I also kind of feel like when I look at the major newspapers I read, Washington Post, the New York Times, the Guardian, LA Times, a bunch of others, the number of those sorts of exploratory interactive dashboards seems to be far and few between these days.
Yeah.
Where it's more focusing on the storytelling than on the big data pieces or the big interactive exploratory pieces. Because my guess would be they have discovered that like you don't get a lot of bang for your buck for that, and people go to the Washington Post to learn the story, they understand the context or the content, rather than like here's this, 700 clicks and filters to get to this one number.
Totally. Yeah. And I think the amount of like sort of design effort that goes into creating something that's highly consumable is also super unappreciated.
Yeah.
And the way you present your data for a particular answer is often so bespoke if you want to do a really good job at it. And
yeah, I mean, I heard a number the other day that the Johns Hopkins COVID tracker cost $13 million to build, which one could argue, whoa, that's a lot of money. But also, like, how many millions of people went to that dashboard every day?
Right.
But that, of course, is also a hopefully unique situation where people want to know for their own health what's happening around them. They don't really, what's happening in another part of the world doesn't necessarily impact them directly. They want to know if they can send their kids to school, if they can go to their grocery store safely, right? So I think that's kind of a unique case, whereas generally we're just putting this stuff out there, which does lead me to a question about if you see the future of dashboarding. Okay, I'll put it this way. You've described Plotly Studio as query the tool to generate a chart for you. Do you see a future, either in Plotly or just generally speaking, where the end user queries an interactive piece, so we'll call it a dashboard, where they query the dashboard using natural language instead of having to click all the buttons? They just ask the question.
Yeah, I think that will happen, but I don't think it will be on the dashboard itself. I think it will just be interacting with the data itself. And instead of the dashboard being this sort of fixed UI, it'll be generative UI. It'll be a generative dashboard where you will be asking questions and getting a unique chart that maybe hasn't been viewed before or originally created by the original author before. And so as an author or an expert in the data, your primary job is to prepare the data in a way and maybe put in some of your own context of important things about the data, so that then the consumers and the viewers can have their own exploratory experience where they can ask the questions directly. So in the case of my, SF public data one, I don't want to go to a dashboard and ask for a question, because the charts that are presented to me might not have the necessary controls or be presented in a way that can answer my question. I do want to go in and say, hey, how has the response time for 311 cases changed in October of this year versus October of last year? And I would love it if the answer showed me sort of proof in the form of a data, right? Like in form of graphs. I don't want to just see it, it dropped 5%. I'm not going to trust that 5% number, because that is that a median? Is that a mean? Is that the 90th percentile? How is it? Right. So instead, the AI is then showing you a set of charts to say, hey, this is before and this is after. Come to your own conclusion. But it's generating charts, right, that the original author might not have known about, because in a data set like that, there's hundreds or thousands of permutations and types of questions that you can ask. And I think that's the really unique thing about this new era of data visualization, is that you can start to ask any question that you want and see this almost generative data visualization. And it's hard as an author to know the types of questions that your users will want to ask unless you work in a really tight organizational
Yeah.
company setting.
Right. But the way you frame it's really interesting because it in lots of ways changes what the job is or the task is of the data viz developer
Mhm.
becomes less about the data viz but more about facilitating or analyzing the data and then facilitating the a set of questions that a user might want to ask.
That's right. Yeah. And I think there's a lot to, for that person to create the initial stories too.
Mm-hmm.
See the viewer to know the types of things that they can ask about. And I think that's a really tricky thing about AI today. I've heard it called like the jagged frontier, where AI
Mm-hmm.
is remarkably great at certain things and
Yeah.
then terrible at other things. And unless you're an expert and have a lot of experience using it, you don't really know what is what, right? And I think for a
Right.
user coming into a dashboard, they might not know the types of questions that can be asked about the data.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing a set of stories that were already created by the data viz expert that show how to structure your questions and your analytical queries, but also show you the realm of possibilities of what you can interrogate is a really important part. But then you leave it up to the end user to kind of choose their own adventure,
Mm-hmm.
without you needing to create a bazillion charts for each end user themselves.
Yeah, and also putting it into a finite space, I would guess, reduces those hallucinations,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yes,
you're not going to get, if I went into ChatGPT or Claude right now and asked for 311 data, it could pull from the New York City database rather than the San Francisco database. But if my Plot Studio dashboard is populated with San Francisco data, then the hallucinations should be minimized.
exactly. Yeah. And there's a tremendous amount of work to sort of create uh, set up the environment so that an end user
Mm-hmm.
is ready to go and ask those questions. And that's a lot of stuff we're thinking about within our product is these different roles where one person is just setting up the data, just setting up the environment, putting in additional context about the data sets so that the end users can come in without needing to do all that work themselves and have a productive experience. Um, so, yeah, I think there's these different roles, and I think the other approach that we take is that we want users to be able to view the answer as a chart or as a table and not
Mm-hmm.
just have the AI hallucinate a story. If you go into ChatGPT today and you say, have 311 cases improved since the mayor has come in, they might look up news articles or they might
Yeah.
hallucinate, something else about it and say like, yes, of course they have. Or, if you structure your question a slightly different way, be like, I love
Mm-hmm.
our new mayor. Isn't it amazing? They might
Yeah.
agree with you, agreeable. But we take this approach as very data driven.
Yeah.
We're not asking the AI to tell you, create an insight for you. We're asking the AI to generate code that will
Right.
use the numbers for you and
Right.
present the numbers to you, and you can come up
Right.
with your conclusion.
Yeah. So on the roles piece, do you, I mean, I think a lot of people in the data viz world are understandably worried about how AI will impact, is data viz not going to be, are data viz creators not going to be a thing in the future? But do you think the role of the data visualization person, the specialist, whatever it is going to be focusing more on uh, I guess facilitating those questions and doing the analytics rather than focusing on how do I make this like really great chart
Mhm.
and just facilitate the data exploration?
I think eventually it could happen that way. I think today the way I view the AI tools is more like productivity tools. And
Mm-hmm.
if
Yeah.
you are a great data viz practitioner today, use AI tools to help you work faster. Um, and and all of those data viz skills that you have today will serve you really well in knowing how to craft the right data visualization. That is still
Mm.
so important. And I see that among our users. I see that internally of certain folks being more productive and effective at using Plotly Studio than others, even though we're all just writing natural language. But the way we structure our visualization, the mechanics of whether we do that in code or in English has changed a lot now. But
Mm-hmm.
where you still think in a really systematic way. You still think in terms of data viz. You still have the data viz in your mind's eye that you want to create, and that's essential. That's an essential skill. I don't think is going away.
Right. Okay. Well, to wrap us up, folks have heard this conversation. They're either terrified or they're super excited. Let's go with the super excited folks. So, where should they go? What do they need to get started with Plotly or Plotly Studio or any other tools that we've been sort of
Yeah, just go to plotly.com, plotly.com. You can download the product for free there directly from the homepage. We've got a great community forum as well. There's a lot of good discussion about this and show and tell, people sharing what they've created. And after you sign up, you'll get an email from us. And if you want to talk further, you can just reply to that email. And a lot of those still go directly to me.
Terrific. Love it. Getting right to the guy.
That's right.
All right, Chris. Thanks a lot for coming on the show. This was really interesting. I'm excited to go in and start to play around with it and see what these new AI tools could do. So thanks again for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned a lot. Hope you will check out Plotly and Plotly Studio. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you're seeing in the world of AI tools and data visualization. That's all I've got for this week. Be sure to come back next time for another great episode of the PolicyViz podcast. So until next time, thanks so much for listening.